My wife confessed her darkest secret in Japanese, not knowing I was fluent. I should explain something about myself first. Most people who meet me assume I'm just another American businessman and with no particular interest in languages or cultures beyond my own. Clean-cut Midwestern accent, the kind of guy who blends into any corporate conference room. That's exactly how I've always preferred it. My fluency in Japanese isn't something I advertise. It's not on my LinkedIn profile. I don't mention it at dinner parties. It's simply a part of me that exists quietly, like knowing how to play piano or having a photographic memory for numbers. I learned Japanese during my 4 years teaching English in Osaka after college. What started as a survival necessity became a passion, then a skill set I maintained through years of reading, watching films, and occasional business trips to Tokyo. By the time I met Aiki, my Japanese was native level fluent, but I never told her the full extent of it. Aiki was second generation Japanese American. Her parents immigrated before she was born. She grew up in California, speaking English at school and Japanese at home, the classic bilingual experience. Her Japanese was perfect, tinged with the formal politeness her parents had instilled. Mine was more colloquial, shaped by late-night conversations in izakayas and the rough-edged Tokyo dialect of my 20s. When we first started dating, she'd occasionally pepper conversations with Japanese phrases, charmed by my basic responses. I let her believe my knowledge was limited to pleasantries and restaurant orders. It wasn't deception exactly, more like keeping a card in my back pocket. I enjoyed the small moments when she'd switch to Japanese with her parents, unaware that I understood every word of their concerns about her dating a white guy. Their gradual warming to me, their approval of my respectfulness and steady career. We married 3 years ago in a ceremony that blended both cultures. Her father, Robert, gave a speech in Japanese that moved me deeply, praising my character, welcoming me as a son, expressing hope for grandchildren. Aiki translated for the American guests, but I'd already understood every word. I saw Robert's eyes meet mine during that speech, and I wondered if he suspected, but I never confirmed it. Our marriage was good. That's what made everything that followed so incomprehensible. We had routines, Friday night dinners at her parents' house, Saturday morning farmers market runs, Sunday evenings meal prepping for the week ahead. We talked about everything, career anxieties, future plans, the small irritations and larger joys of building a life together. We were trying for a baby. She worked as a graphic designer. I managed operations for a mid-sized tech company. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in Seattle with a view of the Sound. Everything was normal until it wasn't. The change was subtle. Looking back, I can identify the markers, but in real time, they seemed like nothing. Aiki started going to the gym more frequently. She bought new clothes. She smiled at her phone in a way that seemed different from her usual social media scrolling. She was distracted during conversations, her responses delayed as though she was mentally elsewhere. I told myself these were positive changes. She seemed happier, more energized. I was glad. Then came the pregnancy announcement. We were in the kitchen on a Wednesday evening in late March. I was chopping vegetables for stir-fry. She stood in the doorway, phone in hand, tears streaming down her face. My first thought was panic. Something terrible had happened. Then she held up the pregnancy test, and relief flooded through me. "We're pregnant," she whispered. I dropped the knife, crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, held her. We stood there together, her crying into my shoulder, me processing the magnitude of the moment. We were going to be parents. The thing we'd been trying for, hoping for, talking about in theoretical terms, it was real. "I can't believe it," she said. "I can't believe it's actually happening." We called her parents that night. Robert answered, and Aiki told them in Japanese, her voice breaking with emotion. I heard her mother crying in the background, Robert's deep, steady voice expressing joy and pride. They'd been waiting for this moment too. Over the next few weeks, Aiki threw herself into pregnancy preparation with characteristic intensity. She bought books, downloaded apps, started tracking every detail, symptoms, measurements, milestones. She scheduled her first OB appointment for early April. I went with her, held her hand during the ultrasound, stared at the grainy black and white image that was somehow our child. 8 weeks, the doctor said. Due date looks like early November. We drove home in a daze, stopped for ice cream, made plans, started thinking about names and nurseries and all the ways our lives were about to change. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. That night, Aki fell asleep early, exhausted from first trimester fatigue. I stayed up late in the living room, scrolling through parenting websites, trying to wrap my head around fatherhood. At some point, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She'd left it there when she went to bed. I glanced at it reflexively. The notification preview showed a text from someone named Matt. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I stared at the message. Matt. I knew a Matt from Aiki's work, a freelance photographer she'd collaborated with on a few projects. They'd gotten coffee a couple times to discuss creative direction. She'd mentioned him casually, the way you mention any professional acquaintance. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." It was probably innocent, a work meeting, but something about the phrasing felt off. The intimacy of "can't wait," the lack of context or project details. I picked up her phone. No password. We'd always kept our phones accessible to each other, a mutual transparency we'd agreed on early in our relationship. I opened her messages. The thread with Matt went back months. I scrolled upward, my stomach tightening with each swipe. The early messages were indeed work-related, discussions about photo concepts, lighting, deadlines. Then, around January, the tone shifted. Compliments, inside jokes, messages sent late at night. By February, they were meeting for drinks after work sessions. The texts became more frequent, more personal. She told him things about herself she'd never told me. Childhood memories, fears, dreams. He responded with similar vulnerability. I scrolled faster, my heart hammering. March. The messages from March were different. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" I sat there, phone in hand, the ice cream we'd bought earlier curdling in my stomach. My wife was having an affair, had been having an affair for months, while we were trying to get pregnant, while we were building a future. I put the phone down, stood up, walked to the bedroom. Aiki was sleeping peacefully, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. I stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, trying to reconcile the woman I knew with the messages I just read. I didn't confront her, not then. Instead, I went back to the living room, opened my laptop, and started taking screenshots of every message. I created a folder on my hard drive, labeled it Documentation. I worked methodically, capturing evidence, noting dates, building a timeline. By the time I finished, it was 3 in the morning. I'd gone through her entire message history with Matt. The affair had started in mid-January. They'd met at a coffee shop to discuss a project. One meeting became 2, then 3. By late January, they were texting daily. By February, they were sleeping together. The messages were explicit in ways that made me feel physically ill. But I saved them all. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Then I opened her calendar. She had an appointment the next day at 1 p.m. labeled Lunch Matt. The location was a restaurant downtown, the same place we'd gone for our anniversary. I closed the laptop, sat in the darkness, tried to process what I'd learned. My wife was having an affair with a photographer named Matt. They'd been sleeping together for months. She was pregnant with what I'd assumed was our child. That last thought hit me like cold water. The baby, the pregnancy we just celebrated, the ultrasound image that showed an 8-week-old fetus. 8 weeks meant conception in early February, right in the middle of her affair with Matt. I opened the laptop again, checked her calendar against the message timestamps. In early February, Matt had been out of town for a week-long shoot. The messages between them during that time were full of longing and anticipation. "Only 3 more days until I see you. I miss you so much." He'd returned on February 8th. They'd met that same night. The messages afterward were explicit about what had happened. February 8th. I pulled up a fertility calculator. If Aiki had conceived on or around February 8th, she'd be 8 weeks pregnant now, in early April. The math aligned perfectly. I sat there in the dark living room, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and felt something inside me go very still and very cold. The baby might not be mine. The child we just celebrated, the future we just started planning, it might all be based on a lie. I needed to know for certain, but I couldn't ask directly. Not yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full situation before I made any moves. The next day, I went to work as usual, acted normal, kissed Ike goodbye before she left for her lunch with Matt. I told her I had back-to-back meetings all afternoon. She smiled, touched my face, told me she loved me. I watched her leave. Then I called in sick to work, got in my car, and drove downtown. I found a coffee shop across the street from the restaurant where Ike and Matt were meeting. Positioned myself at a window seat with a clear view of the entrance. At 12:55, Matt arrived. Late 20s, athletic build, the kind of deliberately casual style that suggested he spent significant time curating his appearance. He waited outside the restaurant, checking his phone. At 1:02, Ike arrived. I watched her approach him, watched the way her face lit up, watched them embrace. Not a professional hug, but something longer, more intimate. His hand lingered on her lower back. She touched his chest briefly before pulling away. They went inside. I couldn't see them through the restaurant windows, but I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. I drove back home, let myself into our apartment, stood in the silence of our living room, looking at all the small markers of our shared life. Photos on the wall, books on shelves, the couch we'd picked out together. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but nothing was the same. I went to my office, sat at my desk, opened a new document, and started making notes. Dates, times, evidence collected, questions that needed answers. I worked with mechanical precision, channeling everything I felt into organized documentation. The most pressing question was paternity. I needed to know if the baby was mine. But standard paternity testing required a sample from the child, which meant waiting until after birth. There was prenatal paternity testing. A blood draw from the mother could provide fetal DNA, but it required the mother's consent and cooperation. Ike would never consent to a paternity test unless I revealed my suspicions. And revealing my suspicions meant confronting her before I was ready, before I had all the information I needed, before I decided how to handle this. I researched alternatives. There were at-home paternity test kits, but again, they required a sample from the child. There were legal options, court-ordered testing, but that required filing paperwork, making accusations, starting a process I wasn't ready to begin. I needed to wait. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I needed to maintain normalcy, gather evidence, and wait until after the birth to confirm paternity. 7 months. I had to keep this secret for 7 months, while watching my wife carry a child that might not be mine. The logistics of that deception felt overwhelming, but the alternative, confronting her now with incomplete information, felt worse. I heard Ike's key in the door, quickly closed my laptop. When she came into the office, I was sorting through papers, looking busy. "How was lunch?" I asked. "Good," she said. "Matt's starting a new project. He wanted to run some ideas by me." "That's nice." She stood in the doorway studying me. "You okay? You look tired." "Just a long day. Work stuff." She came closer, wrapped her arms around me from behind. I felt her chin rest on my shoulder, her hand settle on my chest. "We're going to be parents," she whispered. "Can you believe it?" "No," I said. "I can't." Over the following weeks, I perfected the art of duplicity. I went to prenatal appointments. I listened to heartbeats. I felt kicks. I discussed baby names and nursery colors. I held Aiki when she cried about morning sickness, rubbed her feet when they swelled, assembled the crib we'd ordered online. All while documenting everything. All while gathering evidence. All while preparing for the moment when I'd have to dismantle the life we'd built. I hired a private investigator in mid-April. His name was Dennis, mid-50s, former police detective, the kind of understated professional who inspired confidence without needing to advertise competence. We met in his office, a small space above a dry cleaner in a part of town I'd never had reason to visit. I laid out everything I knew, showed him the screenshots, explained the timeline, asked him to confirm the affair and document it thoroughly. "You want surveillance?" he asked. "Whatever you think is necessary." "And you're sure about this?" "Sometimes people come to me hoping I'll prove them wrong." "I've already proven it to myself," I said. "I just need someone else to verify it." Dennis worked for 3 weeks. His reports arrived via encrypted email, photos, timestamps, location logs. Ike and Matt met twice a week on average, sometimes for coffee, sometimes at his apartment. The photos were clinical in their detail. Ike entering Matt's building at 2 p.m., leaving at 5 p.m. both of them clearly visible, clearly identifiable. Dennis also pulled Matt's background. 32 years old, freelance photographer, decent portfolio, no criminal record, single as far as anyone could tell. He seemed like a normal guy living a normal life, with no apparent awareness that he was sleeping with a married woman whose husband was building a legal case against both of them. In early May, I consulted with a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia Chen, sharp, pragmatic, the kind of lawyer who dealt in facts rather than sympathy. We met in her downtown office, and I presented my documentation. "This is thorough," she said, paging through my evidence folder. "You've been meticulous. I'm in operations management. Thoroughness is my job." "Good, it'll help. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair itself doesn't affect the legal outcome. But it matters for custody, property division, and spousal support, especially if you can prove she's been using marital assets to support this relationship. I've tracked credit card statements. She's spent approximately $3,000 on dinners, hotels, and gifts since January." Patricia nodded. "That helps. Now, the paternity question. You're sure you want to wait until after the birth? Can I test earlier? Prenatal paternity testing is possible, but it requires her cooperation. If she refuses, you'd need a court order, which means revealing your hand. My advice, wait until after the birth. Request testing immediately. If you're not the father, it changes everything. Your financial obligations, custody considerations, the timeline for filing, and if I am the father, then you proceed with a standard divorce and custody arrangement. Either way, you have options." I left Patricia's office with a plan. Wait until the birth, request paternity testing. Once results confirmed whether I was the biological father, proceed accordingly. In the meantime, maintain normalcy, continue documenting, and prepare for multiple scenarios. It felt cold, clinical. But that clinical precision was the only thing keeping me functional. Ike's pregnancy progressed normally. She glowed. That's what everyone said. She was glowing. Her mother came over frequently, bringing Japanese home remedies and traditional pregnancy advice. Her father called weekly to check in, his deep voice full of anticipation and pride. I attended every family dinner, every celebration. I smiled and nodded and played the role of excited father-to-be while internally counting down the days until I could stop performing. The strain of maintaining this facade began showing in small ways. I lost weight. My coworkers commented on it, concerned. I blamed stress at work, upcoming deadlines, the normal anxieties of impending fatherhood. They accepted these explanations because they had no reason not to. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie awake at night, Aiki, sleeping beside me, her hand sometimes resting on her growing belly. I'd stare at the ceiling and think about the child inside her. Was it mine? Was it Matt's? What would I do if the paternity test came back negative? What would I do if it came back positive? Both scenarios felt impossible. Both scenarios required me to make choices I wasn't ready to make. During one particularly difficult night in late May, I got up and went to the living room, opened my laptop, looked through all the evidence I'd collected. Screenshots, surveillance photos, credit card statements, Dennis's reports, hundreds of documents, thousands of pieces of information, all pointing to the same conclusion. My wife had betrayed me thoroughly and was carrying another man's child. I created a new folder, labeled it Emotional Impact, started writing down everything I was feeling. The anger, the grief, the sense of profound betrayal, the fear about the future, the shame of being deceived, the rage at having to perform normalcy while my life crumbled internally. Writing helped. It gave structure to the chaos. It made the emotions manageable, containable. I wrote for 2 hours that night, pouring everything onto the screen. When I finished, I felt lighter. Not happy, not resolved, but lighter. I saved the document, added it to my evidence folder, closed the laptop. This became a pattern. Late-night writing sessions when sleep wouldn't come. Documenting not just the facts of Ike's betrayal, but the emotional toll it took. Creating a record of my internal experience alongside the external evidence. In some strange way, those documents felt like the most important part of my preparation. The screenshots and surveillance photos proved what Ike had done. But the emotional documentation proved what it had cost me, and that mattered. That would matter when this was all over, and I needed to remember why I'd made the choices I'd made. In June, something happened that nearly derailed my careful control. We were at her parents' house for dinner. Aiki was 16 weeks pregnant, just starting to show. Her mother had prepared a feast, traditional Japanese dishes that filled the house with familiar scents. We sat around the table, her parents asking questions about the pregnancy, offering advice, sharing stories about Aiki's own birth. After dinner, Aiki excused herself to use the bathroom. Her mother went to the kitchen to prepare tea. I was alone in the dining room with Robert. He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke in Japanese. "You understand more than you let on, don't you?" I froze. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. I'd been so careful. I hadn't given any indication that I understood the Japanese conversations happening around me. But Robert was perceptive. He'd always been perceptive. I could have lied, should have lied. But something about the directness of his question, the privacy of the moment, made me answer honestly. "Yes," I replied in Japanese. "I understand everything." He nodded slowly. "I thought so. I've watched you during our conversations. You react to things before Aiki translates. Subtle things, timing, facial expressions. I learned Japanese when I taught in Osaka. I never corrected anyone's assumptions about how much I understood. Why not? I don't know. It started as an oversight, then it became useful. People say things around you when they think you don't understand." Robert studied me. "And has anyone said things around you that you weren't meant to hear?" The question hung in the air. I could feel the weight of it. Robert was asking something specific. He suspected something, but what? And how much did he know? "Not from your family," I said carefully. "Everyone in this house has only ever been kind to me." "But from Aiki?" I met his eyes, saw the concern there, the knowing. "I haven't heard Aiki say anything in Japanese that troubles me," I said. It was technically true. Her affair had been conducted in English. Her betrayal had been documented in English text messages and English conversations. The Japanese language had remained, in this situation at least, untainted. Robert continued looking at me. Then he nodded, seeming to accept my answer. But something in his expression suggested he knew there was more to the story. "My daughter is lucky to have you," he said. "You're a steady man. Patient, that's rare." I try to be. Patience is important in marriage, but it has limits. Even patient men have breaking points. I didn't know how to respond to that. Before I could formulate an answer, Aiki returned from the bathroom, and the moment passed. But I thought about Robert's words constantly, over the following weeks. He knew something. Not the specifics, perhaps, but he sensed trouble. His comment about breaking points felt like both a warning and an acknowledgement, an understanding that whatever I was enduring, I had his support. That conversation shifted something in me. I'd been so focused on documenting evidence and preparing legal strategy that I'd isolated myself emotionally. But Robert's perception reminded me that I wasn't alone. When the truth came out, I'd have allies. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it meant support. Terrifying because it meant the deception would impact more people than just Aiki and me. Her parents would be devastated. The family dynamics would shatter. The consequences would ripple outward in ways I couldn't fully predict or control. But that wasn't my fault. That was Aiki's doing. She'd made choices that would hurt everyone who loved her. I was just the one who'd have to reveal those choices. In July, Aiki announced she wanted to have a baby shower. Her friends offered to plan it. I watched the preparations with detached interest. Invitations, decorations, games, gift registries. The shower was scheduled for late August when she'd be 30 weeks along. The event itself was surreal. Aiki's friends filled our apartment, cooing over her belly, asking me questions about fatherhood, offering advice and congratulations. I smiled, thanked everyone, opened gifts, assembled a mental catalog of items I'd never use, bottles and onesies, and blankets purchased by people who had no idea the celebration was built on deception. Matt wasn't at the shower, but I knew from Dennis's surveillance reports that Aiki had seen him the day before, 2 hours at his apartment in the afternoon. She'd come home glowing, attributing her good mood to pregnancy hormones. I excused myself halfway through the shower, claiming I needed to take a work call. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing slowly and deliberately until the rage passed. One of Aiki's friends, a woman named Jessica, who I'd met several times, found me there 20 minutes later. "You okay?" she asked, tapping on the window. I rolled it down. "Yeah, just needed some air." Baby showers can be overwhelming, especially for dads, all that pink and pastel. She smiled sympathetically. "It's a lot," I agreed. "You're going to be a great father," Jessica said. "I can tell. You're so attentive with Aiki, so supportive." I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak. "I'm heading back up," Jessica said. "You coming?" "In a minute." She left. I sat in the car for another 10 minutes, composing myself, rebuilding the facade. Then I went back to the apartment and played my role for another 3 hours, until everyone finally left. That night, after we'd cleaned up, Aiki came to bed glowing with happiness. "That was perfect," she said. "Everyone was so generous, and they all love you. Jessica told me you're going to be an amazing dad." Did she? She did, and she's right. Aiki turned to face me, her hand on my chest. "I'm so lucky. We're so lucky. This baby's going to have the best father." I looked at her, saw genuine emotion in her eyes, genuine happiness, and felt nothing but cold calculation. "We should sleep," I said. "You must be exhausted." She kissed me. I didn't respond, just turned off the light. By late August, Aiki was 32 weeks pregnant. The baby was due in early November. I'd been living with the knowledge of her affair for 5 months. 5 months of performing normalcy. 5 months of documenting evidence and preparing for the confrontation that would eventually come. I was exhausted. Not physically, though the stress had affected my sleep, my appetite, my general well-being, but emotionally. Maintaining the facade required constant vigilance. Every conversation was a performance. Every moment of intimacy felt like a betrayal of myself. I started seeing a therapist in September. Not to discuss the affair. I wasn't ready to articulate that out loud yet. But to process what I was experiencing. The anger, the grief, the strange dissociation that came from living a double life. Her name was Dr. Sarah Brennan. Mid-40s, calm demeanor, the kind of professional presence that made confession feel safe. I told her I was struggling with work stress, that my wife was pregnant and I was feeling overwhelmed by impending fatherhood. All true in a limited sense. "It's normal to feel anxious about becoming a parent," Dr. Brennan said during our second session. "But I'm sensing there's something more you're not saying." "I'm fine. You don't seem fine. You seem like someone carrying a significant burden." I looked at her, considered what it would mean to tell the truth. Finally said, "I'm dealing with something in my marriage, something I can't talk about yet. But it's affecting everything." "Does your wife know you're struggling?" "No." "Do you want her to know?" "Not yet." Dr. Brennan studied me. "That must be very isolating." "It is. Whatever you're dealing with, I hope you know it's okay to ask for support. You don't have to handle everything alone." I nodded, but the truth was, I did have to handle this alone, at least for now, at least until the baby was born and I could confirm paternity and move forward with whatever came next. Over the next few sessions, Dr. Brennan helped me develop coping strategies, breathing exercises for when the anger became overwhelming, journaling techniques for processing complex emotions, mindfulness practices for staying present instead of catastrophizing about the future. None of it addressed the root problem. But it helped me function, helped me maintain the performance, and that was all I needed. In mid-October, 3 weeks before Aiki's due date, something happened that changed everything. We were at dinner at her parents' house. Aiki was 37 weeks pregnant, uncomfortable, and tired. After we ate, she went to lie down in her childhood bedroom. I stayed at the table with Robert and Aiki's mother, Keiko. Keiko was washing dishes. Robert was reading the newspaper. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard Aiki's voice from the bedroom, speaking in Japanese on the phone. She thought she had privacy. The bedroom door was closed. Her parents were in other parts of the house. She didn't know that I was sitting at the dining table, perfectly positioned to hear her through the thin walls. She was talking to Matt. "I can't wait to see you." she said in Japanese. After the baby comes, everything will be easier. We can figure out a way to be together. My blood went cold. I set down my phone, listening intently. I know it's complicated, Aiki continued, but I love you. I want to be with you. This baby, she paused. This baby is yours, Matt. I'm certain. The timing, everything. I know it's yours. I sat very still. Robert lowered his newspaper, looking at me. He'd heard her too. Of course he had. He spoke Japanese. He understood every word his daughter was saying. Our eyes met. I saw shock, then anger, then something like devastation cross his face. Aiki kept talking. My husband doesn't suspect anything. He thinks the baby is his. After it's born, we'll do a paternity test. I'll tell him I want it for medical records or something. Once we have proof, I can file for divorce. Then we can be together properly. She laughed at something Matt said. Yes, I know it sounds like a movie, but it's going to work. Just a few more weeks, then everything changes. She hung up. A moment later, she came out of the bedroom, smiling, oblivious to what had just transpired. She stopped when she saw our faces. Robert's expression had shuddered into something cold and hard. Keiko had stopped washing dishes, a plate suspended in her hands, tears streaming down her face. What? Aiki said. What's wrong? I stood up, walked past her, left the house without saying a word. I drove for 2 hours. Just drove, no destination, processing what I'd heard. Aiki had confirmed it herself. The baby was Matt's. She'd been planning to use a paternity test to justify divorcing me. She'd been orchestrating my humiliation, assuming I was too oblivious to suspect, too trusting to question. And she'd done it in Japanese. The language that connected her to her heritage, to her parents, to the cultural identity she valued so deeply. She'd weaponized it, used it as a shield, believing it gave her privacy when it actually gave me complete transparency. The irony was almost funny, almost. My phone rang repeatedly. Aiki, her mother, Robert. I ignored all of them. Finally, at midnight, I went home. Aiki was sitting on the couch, her face blotchy from crying. She stood when I entered. I need to explain. Don't, I said. Not tonight. You heard me. On the phone. You understood. Yes. You speak Japanese. You've always understood. Yes. She sank back onto the couch. How long? I taught in Osaka for 4 years after college. I've been fluent for over a decade. And you never told me? The absurdity of her indignation almost made me laugh. She was offended that I'd kept a secret while she'd been conducting a months-long affair. We're not discussing my language skills right now, I said. We're discussing your relationship with Matt. We're discussing the fact that you've been planning to divorce me using a baby you know isn't mine. She started crying. I didn't mean for this to happen. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. Are you going to leave me? I don't know yet. That was a lie. I knew exactly what I was going to do. But I wasn't going to tell her my plans. Not until the baby was born and I had proof. Not until I was ready. I went to the guest room, locked the door, lay awake until dawn, listening to Aiki cry in the next room, feeling nothing. The next morning, Robert called. We need to talk, he said in Japanese. Can you come over? I met him at a coffee shop near his house. He was already there when I arrived. 2 cups of coffee on the table. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I owe you an apology, he said, still speaking Japanese. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you from this. This isn't your fault, Robert. She's my daughter. Her behavior reflects on me, on how I raised her. You raised her well. She made her own choices. Those choices don't reflect on you. Robert looked down at his coffee. Keiko cried all night. She's devastated. She had no idea. I had suspicions, but I didn't want to believe them. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. You weren't paranoid. What are you going to do? I'm going to wait for the baby to be born. I'm going to request a paternity test. And then I'm going to make decisions based on the results. And if the baby isn't yours, then I'm going to file for divorce and move on with my life. You're a good man, Robert said. Better than my daughter deserves. I want you to know that whatever happens, Keiko and I, we're on your side. You're our son. That doesn't change. His words broke something loose in my chest. I'd been holding everything so tightly, maintaining such rigid control that I'd forgotten what genuine support felt like. Thank you, I managed. Have you told anyone else? Friends? Family? I hired a private investigator, and I've consulted with a divorce attorney. But no, I haven't told friends or family. I didn't want to make this real until I had confirmation. That's wise. But you shouldn't go through this alone. When the time comes, when you're ready to move forward, you tell us what you need: money, a place to stay, legal support, whatever it is. I appreciate that. We sat in silence for a while. Then Robert said, I confronted Aiki this morning. After you left last night, I told her I heard everything. That you heard everything, that we both know what she's been doing. How did she react? Panic? Denial? Then, finally, admission. She confessed the whole thing. The affair started in January. She's been seeing Matt regularly since then. She believes the baby is his based on timing. And yes, she was planning to use a paternity test to justify divorcing you. Did she say why? She claims she fell in love with Matt, that it just happened, that she didn't plan it. All the usual excuses people make when they betray someone. Did she mention me at all? Any remorse? She expressed regret, but honestly, it felt performative, like she was sorry she got caught more than sorry for what she did. I nodded. That tracked with everything I knew about the situation. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her she'd destroyed her marriage through her own choices, that she'd have to live with the consequences, and that she'd damaged her relationship with me and her mother in ways that might never fully heal. How did she take that? She's devastated. But again, I think it's more about her circumstances than genuine remorse. She's pregnant, alone, and facing the reality that the life she thought she'd have is over. Good, I said. The coldness in my own voice surprised me. Robert looked at me carefully. Don't let this make you bitter. I know that's easier said than done, but bitterness will eat you alive. Whatever happens next, you have to find a way to move forward without letting her choices poison your future. I'll try. The next 3 weeks were hell. We lived in the same apartment but barely spoke. Aiki tried multiple times to initiate conversations, to explain, to apologize. I shut her down every time. After the baby is born, I said. We'll talk after the baby is born. She oscillated between desperate apologies and defensive anger. Sometimes she'd cry and beg for forgiveness. Other times, she'd lash out, accusing me of being cold and unforgiving, of ruining everything by keeping my Japanese fluency secret. That last accusation was particularly rich, as though my private language skills were equivalent to her months-long affair. Her parents tried to intervene. Keiko called me multiple times, crying, begging me to forgive her daughter. I was polite but firm. I wasn't discussing this with anyone until I had all the facts. Robert called too. His call was different. I owe you an apology, he said in Japanese. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you from this. This isn't your fault. She's my daughter. Her behavior reflects on me, on how I raised her. Robert, you raised her well. She made her own choices. Those choices don't reflect on you. What are you going to do? I'm going to wait for the baby to be born. I'm going to request a paternity test. And then I'm going to make decisions based on the results. And if the baby isn't yours, then I'm going to file for divorce and move on with my life. You're a good man, Robert said. Better than my daughter deserves. I didn't respond to that. Aiki went into labor on November 3rd, 2 days before her due date. Her water broke at 3 a.m. I drove her to the hospital, checked her in, stayed by her side through 18 hours of labor. I held her hand. I breathed with her. I supported her through every contraction. Not because I loved her, but because there was a baby being born, and that baby didn't deserve to enter the world surrounded by conflict. The baby, a girl, was born at 9:47 p.m. on November 3rd. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy lungs, perfect APGAR scores. The nurses cleaned her, wrapped her in a blanket, placed her in Aiki's arms. Aiki looked down at her daughter with tears streaming. She's perfect, she whispered. I looked at the baby, dark hair, small features. Too early to tell who she resembled. She could have been anyone's child. What should we name her? Aiki asked. You choose, I said. She named her Emma, a compromise name, neither too Japanese nor too American, a name that could belong to anyone. The nurses asked if I wanted to hold her. I said no. Aiki looked devastated, but she didn't argue. That night, after Aiki and Emma were settled in the recovery room, I spoke to one of the OB nurses privately. I need to arrange a paternity test, I said. She looked surprised but recovered quickly. We can coordinate that. Do you want it done before discharge? Yes, as soon as possible. I'll have the pediatrician come talk to you. The pediatrician was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Morrison. She explained the process, a simple cheek swab from me and from Emma, sent to a lab, results in 3 to 5 business days. Does the mother need to consent? I asked. Legally, no. You're listed as the father on the birth certificate. You have the right to request testing. Then let's do it. They did the swabs that night. Emma didn't even wake up during the process. Dr. Morrison labeled everything, packaged it, sent it to the lab with a rush order. Results by Monday, she said. It was Thursday night. I had 4 days to wait. Aki noticed my absence. I wasn't holding Emma. I wasn't cooing over her. I was civil but distant, present in body but detached emotionally. Talk to me, Ike said on Friday morning. Please, I know you're angry, but she's here. Our daughter's here. Can't we at least... I requested a paternity test, I said. She went pale. What? I requested a paternity test. Results come back Monday. Why would you... You can't just... I can, and I did. She's your daughter. Maybe. We'll know for sure in a few days. Aiki started crying. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please don't take this out on Emma. She doesn't deserve... I'm not taking anything out on anyone. I'm getting facts. Once I have facts, I'll make decisions. We were discharged on Saturday. I drove Aiki and Emma home, helped carry everything inside, set up the bassinet in our bedroom. Then I moved my belongings to the guest room. You're not staying with us? Aiki asked. No. For how long? I don't know yet. Robert came over on Sunday. He held Emma, his face a mixture of joy and anguish. This was his grandchild, but she represented his daughter's betrayal. Have you told Matt? I asked Aiki while Robert was holding Emma. No. Does he know she was born? Yes. I texted him, but I didn't tell him about the test. You should probably give him a heads up that his daughter was born. Aiki flinched. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? She didn't answer. Monday morning, I took the day off work. Sat in the guest room, laptop open, waiting for the email from the lab. It arrived at 11:23 a.m. I opened the attachment. Read the results. Read them again. Let the information settle. The test confirmed I was not Emma's biological father. Probability of paternity, 0.04%. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling the last bit of uncertainty dissolve. I'd known logically, intellectually, for months, but there was always that small voice suggesting maybe I was wrong. Maybe the dates didn't align the way I thought. Maybe there was some explanation. There wasn't. Emma wasn't mine. I printed the results, put them in a folder, walked to the living room where Aiki was nursing Emma on the couch. Results came in. I said. She looked up, her face draining of color. And? I handed her the printout. She read it, tears spilling immediately. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I need you to leave. What? I need you to pack a bag and go stay with your parents. I need space to figure out my next steps. But Emma, she's only 4 days old. Take her with you. You're breastfeeding anyway. She needs to be with her mother. Where will you go? I live here. This is my apartment. You're the one leaving. For how long? I don't know. I'll call you when I've made decisions. Aiki called her father. 30 minutes later, Robert arrived. He helped her pack, loaded baby gear into his car. I watched from the doorway as he carried Emma's car seat out, as Aiki gathered diapers and clothes and all the paraphernalia of new parenthood. Before they left, Robert approached me, spoke quietly in Japanese. What do you need from me? Nothing, just take care of them. I mean for you, what do you need? Do you need a place to stay, money, legal help? I have a lawyer. I have a plan. I'm fine. You're not fine, but no one would be fine after this. I will be, eventually. Robert pulled me into a brief, firm hug. You call me if you need anything. I mean it. You're still my son, regardless of what happens with Aiki. That nearly broke me, but I held it together until they left. Then I sat in the silence of my empty apartment and let myself feel everything I'd been suppressing for 7 months. The rage came first. Pure, undiluted fury at Aiki for what she'd done, for the months of deception, for the baby that wasn't mine, for the future she'd stolen. I paced the apartment, hands shaking, breathing ragged, letting myself feel the full weight of the betrayal. Then came the grief, deep, overwhelming sadness for the life I'd thought I was building, the child I'd thought was mine, the marriage I'd believed in, the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. Then finally came relief. The performance was over. I could stop pretending. I could start rebuilding. I called Patricia Chen the next morning. The paternity test came back, I said. I'm not the father. Okay, that changes things significantly. Where's your wife now? Staying with her parents. Good. That gives you time to prepare. Here's what I recommend. File for divorce immediately, citing the adultery and paternity fraud. Request that she be held financially responsible for any expenses related to the pregnancy and birth that you covered. Request full reimbursement of marital assets spent on the affair. And make it clear you have no financial obligation to the child. What about custody? You have no custody obligations or rights. Emma isn't your child. You're not on the birth certificate as the legal father. We can contest that based on the paternity test. Actually, I am on the birth certificate. They listed me as the father at the hospital. Patricia paused. That complicates things, but we can get it amended. The paternity test proves you're not the biological father. We'll file to have your name removed and request that the biological father be identified and added. His name is Matt Devereaux. I have his information. Perfect. We'll include that in the filing. Over the next week, Patricia prepared all the necessary paperwork. I provided her with everything: screenshots of messages, surveillance photos, credit card statements, the paternity test results. She compiled it into a comprehensive divorce petition that laid out the full extent of Aiki's deception. This is one of the most thorough documentation packages I've seen, Patricia said. It's going to be very difficult for her to contest any of this. Good. One thing to prepare for. She might try to argue for spousal support based on your income disparity, but given the circumstances, the affair, the paternity fraud, I think we can successfully fight that. I want to make sure Emma is taken care of, I said. I don't want the kid to suffer because of her mother's choices. That's admirable, but legally, you have no obligation. The biological father will be responsible for child support. Has anyone told Matt yet? That's not our responsibility, but it's going to come out when we file. He'll be named in the documents. I thought about Matt, 32-year-old freelance photographer who'd been sleeping with a married woman for 10 months, who was now, whether he knew it or not, a father. Let him find out from Aiki, I said. It's her mess to explain. Patricia filed the divorce petition on November 15th. Aiki received the papers 2 days later. She called immediately, hysterical. You can't do this. We can work through this. Please. There's nothing to work through, I said. You lied to me for 10 months. You got pregnant with another man's child while we were trying to start a family. You were planning to divorce me and use the baby as leverage. There's no coming back from that. But we're married. We took vows. You violated those vows. Repeatedly. For months. What about Emma? Don't you care about her at all? Emma is not my daughter. She's Matt's daughter. He should be the one you're talking to about her future. Matt doesn't want... She stopped. Matt doesn't want what? Doesn't want to be a father. Doesn't want the responsibility, and maybe you should have thought about that before sleeping with him. She was crying too hard to respond. I hung up. Robert called later that day. She told me about the divorce papers, he said. I'm sorry it came to this. Don't apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. She made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences. How is she? Devastated. But that's not your problem anymore. And Emma? Healthy, growing. Keiko is helping with the overnight feedings. Aiki is struggling with everything: postpartum hormones, guilt, the reality of single motherhood. But again, not your problem. Has she told Matt? She called him yesterday, told him Emma is his. He didn't believe her at first. She had to send him the paternity test results. He's processing. Is he going to step up? I don't know. He's asking for his own paternity test before he commits to anything. Seems like trust issues run in every direction with this situation. The divorce proceeded quickly. Aiki didn't contest anything. She signed every document Patricia sent. By early December, we had a settlement agreement. I kept the apartment, my retirement accounts, my personal assets. Aiki kept her car, her personal belongings, and returned to living with her parents. No spousal support, no shared custody of Emma, clean separation. The hardest part was updating the birth certificate. Patricia filed a motion to have my name removed and Matt's name added. It required Matt's cooperation. He had to agree to be named as the legal father. According to Robert, Matt was resistant at first. He'd wanted nothing to do with Emma. But Ike pushed. Her parents pushed. Eventually, he agreed to a paternity test, which confirmed he was the biological father. In January, the court amended Emma's birth certificate to reflect reality. I was no longer connected to her legally. I'd never been connected to her biologically. She was simply a child I'd briefly intersected with during the worst period of my life. Through all of this, I continued therapy with Dr. Brennan. Once the divorce was filed, I finally told her everything: the affair, the pregnancy, the deception, the months of performing normalcy while gathering evidence. That's an extraordinary amount of emotional compartmentalization, she said. How are you handling it now that you don't have to maintain the facade? I don't know. Some days I'm fine, other days I feel like I'm drowning. That's normal. You experienced a profound betrayal. You're grieving not just the relationship, but the future you thought you had, the child you thought was yours, the life you'd been building. I don't miss her, I said. Is that wrong? I don't miss Seiki at all. It's not wrong. It's honest. You spent 7 months emotionally detaching from her. By the time you filed for divorce, you'd already processed most of your grief. What you're feeling now is probably relief. She was right. I did feel relief. The performance was over. I could stop pretending. I could start rebuilding. But there's also anger, I admitted. A lot of anger. At her, for obvious reasons. But also at myself. For not seeing it sooner. For being so trusting. For letting myself be deceived. That's also normal. But I want you to be careful about self-blame. Aiki made deliberate choices to hide her affair. She was careful, calculated. The fact that you didn't immediately detect something that was being actively concealed from you doesn't reflect a failure on your part. It feels like a failure. I know, but it isn't. What you did, the documentation, the strategic planning, the emotional control, that shows remarkable strength and intelligence. You protected yourself in an impossible situation. That's not failure. That's survival. Her words helped. Not immediately, but over time. I started to see my actions during those 7 months, not as cold or calculating, but as necessary. As self-preservation in the face of profound betrayal. In February, 3 months after Emma's birth, I ran into Matt at a coffee shop. He was in line ahead of me, ordering something complicated with multiple modifications. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, the general dishevelment of new parenthood. He recognized me. Tensed visibly. We hadn't spoken since everything came out. Can we talk? He asked. I don't think we have anything to discuss. 5 minutes, please. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We took our coffees to a corner table. I wanted to apologize, Matt said. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need to say it. I didn't know Ike was married when we first got involved. She told me she was separated. By the time I found out the truth, we were already involved, and I made bad choices. I'm not proud of it. I looked at him, tried to find anger, but mostly felt tired. She told you she was separated? Yes, for the first month. Then she admitted she was still living with you, but said the marriage was over, you just hadn't filed yet. I believed her because I wanted to. That's my fault. Did you know about the pregnancy? Not at first. She told me in April, said she wasn't sure who the father was. I thought there was a chance it was yours. I didn't push for answers because I was a coward. And now I'm a father. Emma is my daughter. Ike and I aren't together. We tried for a few weeks after you filed, but it didn't work. Too much guilt, too much damage. So now I'm figuring out co-parenting with someone I barely know while dealing with my own guilt about how we got here. That sounds hard. It is. But I deserve it. You didn't deserve any of this. And I'm sorry I contributed to it. I nodded, took a sip of my coffee. I appreciate the apology. I don't know if I forgive you, but I appreciate it. That's fair. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Matt said, for what it's worth, Aiki talks about you sometimes, with regret. She knows she destroyed something good. It doesn't matter now. No, I guess it doesn't. We finished our coffees, shook hands awkwardly, left the coffee shop separately. I thought about that conversation for days. Matt had apologized, taken responsibility, and expressed genuine remorse. It didn't change what had happened, but it provided a kind of closure I hadn't expected. Something about his willingness to own his mistakes, to articulate his guilt without making excuses, felt important. It didn't absolve him, but it showed self-awareness, growth, the recognition that his choices had consequences beyond himself. I couldn't hate him. I wanted to. Part of me thought I should, but mostly I just felt a kind of exhausted sympathy. He'd been lied to as well. Not to the same extent, but enough. And now he was dealing with the fallout, an unplanned child, a fractured relationship, the guilt of having contributed to someone else's pain. By spring, 6 months after discovering Ike's affair, I was starting to feel like myself again. I'd settled into my apartment, found new routines, started dating casually. Nothing serious, just reminding myself that connection and trust were still possible. I joined a gym, started running again, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the worst of the situation. Took a weekend trip to Portland, just to get out of Seattle, to remind myself that the world extended beyond the small, painful sphere I'd been living in. Robert and I stayed in touch. We met for lunch monthly, usually at a Japanese restaurant where we could speak Japanese freely. He updated me on Emma. She was growing, hitting milestones, becoming a person. I listened politely but kept emotional distance. She wasn't my daughter. Her life wasn't my concern. Ike asks about you sometimes, Robert said during one of our lunches in March. She shouldn't. I know, I tell her the same. But she struggles with what she did. The guilt is eating her. She made her choices. Yes, and she'll live with them. But I think she hoped, even now, that you might forgive her someday. I don't hate her, I said, but I don't forgive her either. Forgiveness suggests I've processed something and moved past it. I haven't processed it. I've just accepted it and moved forward. There's a difference. Robert nodded. That's fair. More than fair, actually. You're entitled to whatever feelings you have, or don't have. How's Keiko handling everything? She's heartbroken. She loves Ike, but she's ashamed of what Ike did, and she feels like she failed somehow. Like if she'd been a better mother, Ike wouldn't have made these choices. That's not rational. Parental guilt rarely is. I tell her the same thing, but she struggles with it. Tell her I don't blame her, or you. This was Ike's doing, not yours. I will, thank you. In early summer, I started seeing someone, a woman named Lauren I'd met through mutual friends. She was a teacher, divorced, no kids. She knew my history in broad strokes, that I'd recently ended a marriage, that there'd been infidelity. But I didn't go into details until we'd been dating for 2 months. One evening in June, we were at her apartment, making dinner together. She asked about my marriage. I told her everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the months of secret documentation, the paternity test, the divorce. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That's one of the most painful stories I've ever heard. It was painful to live through. How are you doing now? Really? Better. Some days are harder than others, but mostly, I'm okay." Do you think you'll ever trust someone again? I'm trusting you. Are you, or are you keeping part of yourself protected? I thought about that. She was right, I was holding back. Maintaining distance. Still afraid of being vulnerable. I'm trying, I said. I want to trust, but it's hard. I understand. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. That conversation shifted something. I started letting Lauren in, sharing more, allowing myself to be vulnerable despite the fear. She was patient with my walls. She didn't push when I pulled back. She gave me space when I needed it and stayed present when I was ready to connect. Slowly, carefully, I started to believe that maybe trust was possible again. By fall, a full year after Emma's birth, I felt genuinely happy. The divorce was finalized. I'd rebuilt my life. I had a relationship with someone who valued honesty and communication. I had friends, work, hobbies, a full, complex life that had nothing to do with Aiki or the destruction she'd left behind. I still saw Robert occasionally. He'd become something like a father figure. Ironic, given that our connection existed because I'd married his daughter. But he was a good man, steady, honest, the kind of person I respected. During one of our lunches in October, he told me Aiki was engaged. To Matt? I asked. No, they ended things months ago. She's with someone new, someone she met through work. He knows about Emma, about everything. He's apparently a good guy. I hope it works out for her. Do you mean that? Yes, I don't wish her harm. I just don't wish to be part of her life. That's mature. It's survival. Holding on to anger would only hurt me. She made mistakes. She's dealing with the consequences. I'm moving forward. That's all I can do. Robert smiled. You're a better person than most would be in your situation. I'm just trying to be a person who doesn't let someone else's choices define the rest of my life. Looking back now, 2 years after discovering Ike's affair, I can see the entire experience with more clarity. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. But so is the healing. So is the growth. I learned things about myself I wouldn't have learned otherwise. I learned I'm capable of strategic thinking under emotional duress. I learned I can compartmentalize when necessary. I learned patience has limits, but so does rage. And I learned that documenting reality doesn't make it less painful, but it does make it manageable. I learned that family isn't always about blood. Robert remained in my life not because he had to, but because he chose to. That meant something. I learned that trust is fragile, but not impossible. Lauren and I are still together. We've talked about marriage, about children, about building something real and lasting. It scares me. But I'm willing to try. I learned that closure isn't always a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's just waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about the person who hurt you in weeks. It's finding yourself genuinely happy and surprised by it. It's letting go not because you've forgiven, but because holding on stops serving you. Emma is 2 years old now. I've never met her. I've seen pictures. Robert occasionally shows me photos on his phone. Proud grandfather that he is. She looks like Aiki. Dark hair, bright eyes, curious expression. She's loved. That's what matters. Matt is apparently a decent father. He and Aiki co-parent civilly. He has Emma every other weekend. Pays child support, shows up to birthdays and holidays. He's doing the work. I respect that, even though I don't particularly want to think about him. Aiki is engaged to someone named David. They're planning a small wedding next spring. Robert says David is patient and kind, willing to take on the complexities of Aiki's situation. I hope he knows what he's getting into. I hope she's learned from her mistakes. I hope they're happy, genuinely. As for me, I'm rebuilding. That's what this whole experience taught me, that you can rebuild. That catastrophic destruction doesn't mean permanent devastation. That you can take the pieces of what was supposed to be your life and construct something entirely new. My Japanese fluency is no longer a secret. Lauren knows, my friends know. I use it when it serves me, work trips to Tokyo, helping Robert when he needs translation, connecting with Japanese colleagues. It's just a skill now, not a hidden weapon or source of painful irony. Sometimes I think about the moment I overheard Aiki on the phone, speaking in Japanese about the baby being Matt's. The moment everything became undeniable. That conversation changed my life. Not because of what she said, I'd already known the truth, but because it forced me to stop documenting and start acting. There's a strange power in language, and in understanding something you're not supposed to understand, in holding knowledge that others assume is hidden. My fluency in Japanese gave me that power, but it also gave me pain. The language that helped me connect with Aiki's family also revealed her betrayal. I don't regret learning Japanese. I don't regret keeping it private. I don't regret any of the choices I made during those 7 months of careful documentation and strategic planning. I did what I needed to do to protect myself and ensure I had all the information before making life-altering decisions. Would I have preferred to never experience the betrayal in the first place? Of course, but I don't get to choose what happens to me. I only get to choose how I respond. I chose methodical preparation over reactive anger. I chose evidence over emotion. I chose patience over immediate confrontation. Those choices served me well. They gave me control in a situation designed to strip me of control. And now, 2 years later, I have a life I'm proud of. A relationship built on honesty, work I find meaningful, friendships I value, peace of mind that comes from knowing I handled an impossible situation with integrity. The story I tell people, when they ask about my divorce, is simple. We grew apart, wanted different things, ended things amicably. That's easier than explaining the full truth. Easier than reliving the betrayal. Most people don't need the details, they just need to know I'm okay now. And I am okay, more than okay. I'm happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd confronted Aiki immediately when I first discovered the affair. If I demanded answers in March instead of waiting until November, would anything have changed? Would she have ended things with Matt? Would she have convinced me the baby was mine? I'll never know. But I'm glad I didn't take that path. The methodical approach gave me power. It gave me time to process independently. It gave me control over the narrative and the timeline. Some people might call what I did cold, calculating, cruel even, to let Aiki believe everything was fine for 7 months while I gathered evidence against her. But I call it self-preservation. I call it strategic. I call it ensuring I had every fact before dismantling my life. Aiki made choices that destroyed our marriage. I made choices that protected myself from further destruction. We're both living with the consequences of our respective decisions. The Japanese language, which once connected me to her family and helped me navigate a bilingual marriage, is now just a tool I use. It's not loaded with emotional weight anymore. It's not a symbol of betrayal. It's just a language. Robert and I still meet for lunch, still speak Japanese, still maintain the relationship we built despite everything. That's important to me. It suggests that good things can survive even catastrophic circumstances. That family can transcend biology and marriage and legal documents. Lauren asks sometimes if I think about Emma, if I wonder what she's like, if I feel any paternal connection despite the paternity test results. The honest answer is no. Emma is a child whose life intersected with mine briefly during a traumatic period. I hope she's happy. I hope she's healthy, but she's not mine, and I don't feel responsible for her. That might sound harsh, but it's the truth. And I've learned that honesty with myself, with others, is the only sustainable foundation for moving forward. Dr. Brennan and I still meet monthly. Our sessions now focus less on processing trauma and more on maintaining wellness, on building healthy relationships, on recognizing patterns that might indicate I'm slipping back into defensive behaviors. "You seem lighter," she said during our last session, "less burdened." I feel lighter. What changed? I stopped carrying anger. I stopped revisiting the betrayal. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. None of that serves me, so I let it go. That's significant growth. It's survival. I couldn't keep living in that pain, so I chose something else. And what did you choose? This. The life I have now, the person I'm becoming, the future I'm building with Lauren, all of it. I chose to move forward instead of staying stuck. That choice, to move forward, is what defines me now. Not the betrayal, not the months of deception, not the divorce, the choice to rebuild. I'm 38 years old. I have a career I'm good at, a relationship that fulfills me, friends who support me, family, Robert, Keiko, who consider me their own despite the legal dissolution of my marriage to their daughter. I have peace, clarity, hope for the future. The version of myself who discovered those text messages 2 years ago, who sat in his living room at 3 a.m., documenting evidence, planning legal strategy, steeling himself for months of performance, that version feels distant now, like a character in someone else's story. But he's still part of me. The strategic thinking, the emotional resilience, the ability to function under pressure. Those qualities didn't disappear when the crisis ended. They're integrated now, part of my foundation. Sometimes people ask if I'd ever get married again, if I'd ever have kids. Lauren and I have discussed it. The answer is yes. Tentatively, carefully, with full awareness of the risks. But yes, because the alternative, letting Aiki's betrayal permanently close me off from connection and family, would be letting her choices define my future. And I refuse to give her that power. She made her mistakes. I processed them. I moved on. What happens next is entirely my choice. And I choose hope. I choose trust. I choose the possibility of building something beautiful despite having experienced something devastating. That's not naivety. It's not denial. It's deliberate optimism backed by experience and self-knowledge. I know what betrayal looks like. I know how to recognize red flags. I know how to protect myself. But I also know that not everyone is Aiki, that not every relationship is doomed, that happiness is possible even after catastrophic loss. Lauren knows all of this. She knows my history. She knows my fears. She knows the walls I've built and the effort it takes to dismantle them. And she's patient. She's honest. She's willing to do the work alongside me. That's rare. That's valuable. That's worth the risk. So here I am, 2 years after my world imploded, building something new. The apartment is mine, the furniture is different, the routines have changed, but the foundation, honesty, communication, self-respect, that's solid. I see my ex-wife occasionally. Seattle isn't that big. We've run into each other at the grocery store, at the farmer's market, once at a restaurant where she was having dinner with David. We nod politely, sometimes exchange brief pleasantries, but there's nothing there anymore. No anger, no longing, no residual attachment, just neutral acknowledgement of shared history. She looks different now, older maybe, or just different. The woman I married feels like a stranger when I see her. I can't reconcile the person she was, or the person I thought she was, with the person who betrayed me so thoroughly. So I don't try. I just accept that people are complex, capable of both profound love and profound deception, and that sometimes those contradictions exist in the same person. I've learned that relationships require more than love. They require trust, honesty, consistent action. They require both people showing up authentically, communicating clearly, addressing problems before they metastasize into betrayals. Ike and I didn't have that. Maybe we never did. Maybe the foundation was always shakier than I realized. Maybe I missed warning signs because I wanted to believe in the life we were building. Or maybe she just made choices that had nothing to do with the quality of our relationship. Maybe her affair wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was about her own insecurities, her own desires, her own inability to communicate what she needed. I'll never know for certain, and I've stopped trying to understand. Some questions don't have satisfying answers. Some betrayals can't be explained in ways that bring closure. So I focus on what I can control, my own choices, my own growth, my own future. And that future looks bright, genuinely bright. Not despite what happened, but because of how I chose to respond to it. I didn't let betrayal destroy me. I let it refine me. I let it teach me. I let it show me what I'm capable of enduring and overcoming. That's the real story. Not the affair, not the deception, not the months of careful documentation and legal maneuvering. The real story is resilience. It's choosing to rebuild. It's refusing to let someone else's mistakes define the trajectory of your entire life. My wife confessed her darkest secret in Japanese, not knowing I was fluent. That confession didn't destroy me. It liberated me. It gave me information I needed to make informed decisions. It allowed me to reclaim agency in a situation designed to strip me of control. And now, 2 years later, I'm grateful for that linguistic irony. Not because I'm glad she betrayed me, but because I'm glad I had the tools to understand the full scope of her betrayal before making life-altering decisions based on incomplete information. Knowledge is power. Language is power. Self-control is power. I wielded all three during the worst period of my life, and I emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, more resilient. That's the takeaway. That's the lesson. That's what I'd tell anyone going through similar circumstances. Gather your information, maintain your composure, protect yourself, and remember that you have more power than you think in even the most devastating situations. And when it's over, when the dust settles and the legal papers are signed and the shared life is dismantled, choose to rebuild. Choose hope. Choose the possibility of something better, because that's what I did. And I'm happier now than I've been in years. Not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because I refused to let that hurt be the final chapter of my story. This is the final chapter, this rebuilding, this new relationship, this peace I've found, this life I'm actively creating instead of passively experiencing. My wife confessed her darkest secret in Japanese, not knowing I was fluent. And in doing so, she freed me to build a life defined by honesty, integrity, and genuine connection. For that, unexpectedly, I'm grateful. Thanks for hanging out with me through this story. It's been cathartic to share it, to put into words the journey from devastation to rebuilding. If you're going through something similar, know that it gets better. Not immediately, not easily. But eventually, with work and time and deliberate choices, it gets better. Take care of yourself. Trust yourself. And remember that the end of one story is just the beginning of another. It's always a good time having you here.